This area is going to make that big turn. Yesterday when I joined you, the news was better, and that continues, that holds. I know there's a lot of noise out there, a lot of other entities out there, but the overall news is good. Now, I don't wish a storm on anyone. This is going to be a big rainmaker through the Bahamas. We're watching the Southeast U.S., and eventually this will work its way toward Bermuda. This is Ombberto, a major hurricane. It became a Category 5 hurricane yesterday. That one behaving, staying over water, so I want to cover that. But updated action areas. I really value your means, your time, your resources. So I really want to update again where we need to take some action and where we do not because of the big turn. But that flooding, that is going to persist in spots. Even this morning, we've had areas of heavier rain in parts of Jamaica. I'm watching that carefully for us in the Caribbean. Now, in this video, I want to take you through this and show you the high-resolution model for this, show you the winds inside of it, and go deeper into hurricane season, other spots we're watching. I want to swing back for us in the Caribbean and the Gulf, where we'll see a buildup of some rain. We'll cover that as well in this video. But this area should become Imelda today. But either way, moving right through the Bahamas as expected with the heavier rain and tropical storm-like conditions. That is right on track. It will eventually take a curve. That's what we were talking about yesterday, kind of almost that stall and then turning. And here's Bermuda watching that. Here's Ombberto, that powerful hurricane right where we like it, sitting over water. Now, to the south of what is Imelda forming, by the time you watch this video, it may already be Imelda. We'll see as we continue to watch the conditions throughout the day, but really heavier rain, eastern Cuba, Jamaica, watching that. Near the Cayman Islands, a couple areas of showers that will be possible. Haiti, we're doing better. In this time of year, if I'm not mentioning your location, that's actually generally a good thing, of course. I'm always mentioning the spots where we have some of the heaviest weather moving in. But I'll take you around. We'll go island by island, country by country in this video. Now, here's the updated track, really an extension of what we had, what I was showing you yesterday through the day, working its way through the central and northern Bahamas, southern Bahamas. We're going to be doing better. Again, over 700 islands in the Bahamas. Southern Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, pretty good shape, but the rain from Cuba right up through the Bahamas. Again, Imelda, that'll be the name once it gets a name. And then eventually, as this gets into the northern Bahamas tomorrow, it will start to kind of almost stall out, slow down, and then on Tuesday, it could become a hurricane. Still not certain about that from everything I'm seeing. It should become a strong tropical storm. It may become a low-end hurricane and then taking that big turn, but unfortunately near Bermuda. Now, with that said, near Bermuda, I do expect this to get tied up into a front, so that should at least weaken it somewhat before it moves into Bermuda, potentially by the time we get into Thursday. So watching that very carefully. With that, those tropical storm warnings are up throughout the northern and central Bahamas, where we have been taking action for those tropical storm conditions, all right on track. There are some tropical storm watches out for the coast of Florida. I expect more in the way of this staying offshore, but with that, some coastal impacts all the way through the Southeast U.S. So I really want to break that down for you specifically right here. So there's a lot to cover here. Now, we are in action mode right now, really only in the northern and central Bahamas, right? That's where we're going to have the tropical storm impacts, the flooding possible. Now, with that said, and I trust your understanding with a system like this, again, this is a no-hype channel. I want to keep it in perspective. I believe the center of this will be staying offshore at this point of the Southeast U.S., and that is good news. That is flat-out good news, not moving in. So with that, we're not necessarily in full throttle action mode along the Southeast U.S., but North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and as we work our way into Florida, along the coast, the winds are going to be gusty. The water is going to be so very high. We know that. We could have some coastal overwash. Coastal flooding will be likely in spots, even the Outer Banks of North Carolina, all the way south. So while we're not in full throttle action mode, we're not putting nails into your homes to board up. We're being very cautious right along the immediate coast. This is where we're in action mode. We may have to make some of those just kind of general preps along the coast, monitoring some of the flooding. In Bermuda, we're in monitor mode for this area because it's going to make that big turn. So I hope that made sense. I really value your time and your resources. So I just really want to kind of nudge some of those areas down because there is good news to pass along. But we need to watch out for the threats, one in which will still be the rain. Even as this makes a turn, look, for example, North Carolina and South Carolina along the coast, we're going to have some totals of 4 to 6 inches of rain. It could be a little bit more in some spots, still pushing 8 inches. I'll show you the high resolution model with a lot of rain pushing in. So we have distinct threats The news is better, but there's still some areas to really watch. Now, you can see the modeling with this big turn. Why is it going to make the big turn? It's what we were talking about 5-6 days ago. We needed to watch Ombberto. Would it kind of carve a path for this? And it looks like it's going to do so. A stronger Ombberto would be more likely to help this give a big turn, and that's exactly what we've been seeing. Again, yesterday that became a Category 5 hurricane. Here's the Google DeepMind. So this is the AI modeling. This has been very off at times this year for this system. It has done very well. That's like all models. Some do good with the environment at certain times. Some do well with the environment at certain times. Others don't. Now you can see it making that turn, and this is right in line with the other models. There is some uncertainty near Bermuda, and if it kind of lifts up to the north, that is just down the road. But everything I'm seeing out there, not just the modeling, but what I'm seeing in the environment makes sense. And that's key for me as a forecaster. I've been doing this for decades. Not only the models, but is it making sense? Is it matching up with what's going on in the environment? As of now, it is. Now, there should be that strengthening again into Imelda today. It may become a hurricane as we get into several days out, but either way, as it approaches Bermuda, it shouldn't be as compact. It should start to lose some of its tropical characteristics. That is good, and that is important. Meanwhile, Ombberto will be to the west of Bermuda as that major hurricane winds 155 miles per hour. That thing is a beast, fortunately sitting over water. And know that I'm watching the water temperatures. We have that Gulf Stream, the very warm water sliding up the southeast coast of the U.S. Can that intensify Imelda further? It can. And again, into a hurricane. With that, the track still generally keeps it sitting offshore, and that is key. Plus, it's not just the water temperatures, it's what's going on above our heads. There is some wind shear, little dry air on the backside, so there's a lot of elements that I'm watching. Now, here's the high-resolution model. Then I want to show you the winds, the European model. I got you covered. And then long-term, what we're watching in the tropics. This is for today, and you can see this area, the center, right through here, right through us in the northern Bahamas. I'm mentioning Freeport, New Providence. We're going to have some really heavy rain. We know about that, right? Some gusty winds, some of the gusts about 50 miles per hour, 80 kilometers an hour. I'll show you that. Heaviest weather offshore of Florida, but we'll get some of those rain bands kind of clipping in, but nothing we haven't seen before. But there's the core of this sitting right into tonight and tomorrow morning. Let me stop it here. The center of this, really close to the northern Bahamas. So the central and southern Bahamas will be getting improvements tomorrow. Northern Bahamas, the center is sitting here, but out ahead of it, there's a lot of moisture getting tied up into a front, and that's why parts of North Carolina and South Carolina, I just showed you, some of those rain totals will be substantial along the coast and just a little bit inland, not as much through the higher terrain. We're going to monitor that inland flooding, though, very carefully. Then through the day tomorrow, this is 2 p.m. tomorrow, the center pulls to the north of the Bahamas. We'll start to get some of the improvements late in the day tomorrow in the northern Bahamas. That is great. And you see along the coast, the core of this stays offshore, the core of the tropical storm. We will get brushed, though, with those coastal impacts, with some of the outer rain bands trying to work in. That's why I mentioned along the coast, we need to, if you've got some furniture out or something like that, you may want to bring it in to be on the safe side. And then as this lifts up to the north here by tomorrow evening, tomorrow night, that strong onshore flow continues to pump in, and that's why I mentioned some of the coastal flooding, right? The heavier rain, you see it here. This is by the time we get into Tuesday morning. Here's Tuesday morning. It's 8 o'clock Tuesday morning. Strengthening, strong tropical storm. Outer rain bands could clip parts of Georgia, still into parts of Florida. That onshore flow persists, and you see that additional heavier rain. So I mentioned inland, even near the higher terrain. In particular, tomorrow night into Tuesday, we need to watch out for that flooding. Interior sections of North Carolina, South Carolina, giving you the heads up. We'll get some of that flooding across interior sections. But the good news still is, while there are distinct impacts, this is staying. The center is offshore. That is huge. And then watching this is Ombberto. That's what's going to carve a path for this system. Now, let me take out a little bit more. This is the non-high resolution model. This here is the American model. And then I want to show you the winds inside of this and the European model. The center staying offshore. That is the most important piece. What's happening is, here's Bermuda, here's Ombberto. Because Ombberto got strong, that is the dominant feature in the environment. So that is the big player. That's going to eventually carve a path. This area starts to lift. I just showed you all of this. The center being offshore, the rain bands hitting the coast, heavier moisture, heavier rain, parts of North and South Carolina moving in. We'll get those gusty winds, coastal Georgia, Sea Island, seeing some of that. And then as we work our way forward over toward Monday, you see the center of this offshore north of the Bahamas later tomorrow. So we are improving quickly in the Bahamas. Still gusty winds throughout the evening tomorrow. Still some rain bands, but improving. Watching the coastal impacts here, the inland flooding. But there's Ombberto, again, the major player, right? That is the stronger, dominant feature. And you get almost a bit of the Fujiwhara effect, which is when you have two systems close by, they really influence each other. They can almost rotate around each other. So as Ombberto moves up, it almost kind of pulls and almost pinwheels Imelda off the coast. That is the good news piece of this. Watching the heavier rain, the coastal impacts. But again, we don't wish a storm on anyone. Watching Bermuda. Now, as this approaches Bermuda, here's Wednesday. If it stays on track, any changes, thank you for subscribing, so you'll get the alerts. So if you subscribe to the channel, if there's any changes, you'll get the alerts first. But watching this area here on Thursday, which could bring some tropical storm or hurricane conditions to Bermuda on Thursday. That's why we are in monitor mode in Bermuda, but I do expect it to not be as strong, for example, as an Ombberto, right? It's going to get tied up into a front. It'll gradually lose its tropical characteristics. That is some good news to pass along. Now, watching the winds, miles per hour and kilometers an hour in this. Now, we are watching the winds here, the white shading. Those would be winds of about 50 miles per hour. These are gusts, even up to about 70, but 70 sitting just offshore, that red shading in there. So we're talking about some of the winds gusting from about 50 to 70 miles per hour, 80 to about 110 kilometers an hour. And then you see that turn. There's the big turn. And the reason why is there is Ombberto, but that persistent flow Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday, that onshore flow for many of us north and South Carolina. Keeping an eye on the Tidewater area of Virginia, could be a little bit of a backup in through there as this area pulls away. Watching Bermuda as we work our way into Thursday, and you see some of these reds showing up and even some of the yellows. There's going to be strong winds. If this stays on track, we'll have at least hurricane force gust in Bermuda as this works in on Thursday. Bermuda, I know you do a good job preparing for these sorts of things, so we'll be watching this carefully. Got you covered in Bermuda. We're in monitor mode. It looks like Thursday would be the day we could get some big impacts from Imelda. So here's the European model, and I want to show you this, how it's tied together. I want to zoom down shortly Jamaica for some of the heavier storms. I want to show you the Gulf in a second with some of the rain that will be building with another spot to watch. But here's Bermuda, here's Ombberto, here's Imelda, just to give you the feel of how this is on track, and the models are seeing it. The environment all makes sense. There's the additional rain. This is tomorrow. Here is Imelda pulling north of the Bahamas, still south of it. Jamaica, Cuba, even Haiti, even the Turks and Caicos and southern Bahamas, we'll see it kind of influence with some of that rain kind of lifting in on the south of this, just those feeder bands, those long stretches of rain that lift to the north. That's why flooding is a concern across parts of East Cuba and Jamaica. Then it starts to make its turn. Here's Tuesday. There's Ombberto as this works its way north of Bermuda. It carves that path for this to almost follow it. This is the dominant feature. This one is the copycat trying to follow it as this lifts off toward the west, but as it does, or east rather, as it does, it will be very close to Bermuda. You see it here. This is by the time we get into Wednesday, approaching Bermuda, and then after that on Thursday, this area will bring those tropical storm and or hurricane conditions right into Bermuda, or at least close by. And we'll monitor this. The heaviest weather maybe just south, maybe right on top of Bermuda. That's what we'll be fine-tuning in upcoming videos for any potential impacts here. Still the overall flow bringing some of that coastal overwash, coastal flooding to parts of the mid-Atlantic U.S. as we work our way into the even middle of the upcoming week. Here's the big picture, how it is tied together. And you can see here we have this kind of front along the east coast of the U.S. back through the Atlantic region of Canada. There goes Ombberto. Here is Imelda drawing in that rain out ahead of it, even southeastern Virginia, watching over toward Norfolk. And then we get down to the south, watching across 64, you get back toward Rocky Mount, some heavier rain all the way back through Charleston. You see this area starting to make its turn as Ombberto lifts near Bermuda and starts to move. It starts to help pull this area, carving the path for it to move, but we're still watching that rain. even as far inland as Roanoke, Virginia, with some of that rain, watching some heavier rain in spots, but all of that diminishing as we work our way into Wednesday. Then Wednesday into Thursday, watching Bermuda, keeping an eye on the Atlantic region of Canada, New England, got you covered. If anything kind of funky happens, anything weird happens with these systems, I'll let you know in advance warning. But by Thursday, watching that area there as we get closer to Bermuda for some additional tropical storm to hurricane impacts again. We've really had that up and around pattern this year where we've had several threats for Bermuda, and then by the time we get into the end of the week and the weekend, we'll monitor the Atlantic region of Canada to see if this stays offshore. As of now, it looks like it will, but watch this over toward the Gulf. We're going to get a buildup of moisture. Not saying we're going to get development, but the Gulf has been untouched this season. This time of year, we start to see more fronts through parts of Canada and the U.S. Moisture can get left over, and we look closer to home for development, not necessarily off the coast of Africa. So in the Caribbean, in the Gulf, we really watch close to home for development. There will be additional rain by the time we get into the upcoming weekend. In the northern Gulf, water temperatures are warm, so just know that I'm monitoring that for any additional development. We've got a long way to go, of course, in the hurricane season. Now, here's the closer look across the Caribbean. Watching the rain heavy at times, especially in the first half of the day for us in Jamaica. Watching over toward Haiti, south side near Jacmel. We had some big flooding yesterday. Watching back toward parts of Cuba, the moisture, Costa Rica, Panama. Eastern Pacific, things have been behaving. There's been activity, but it's been staying over water. I'm watching that. Scattered areas of rain, parts of Central America. And as all of this lifts to the north, I mentioned Turks and Caicos, southern Bahamas, still back through Haiti, the Dominican Republic. We could get some showers and storms. And Jamaica, spotty elsewhere. And then as we work our way into Tuesday and Wednesday, watching out for some areas of rain, no doubt, monitoring what's going on up here, keeping an eye on some additional tropical waves. In the short term, I'm not seeing development. This is Tuesday out of this one. I'll keep an eye on some of this moisture that is just off toward the east of us, east of Antigua, Bermuda, east of St. Kitts and Nevis, as we work our way through the week. So I'm watching tropical waves out there in the Atlantic, not seeing signs of development, but then we'll be watching as well what could try to develop closer to home. Now, the swells are really going to be building. Of course, the seas, absolute messing through here with both of these systems. You can see here's meters on the bottom of your screen, feet on the right-hand side of your screen. Again, incredibly dangerous waters with those higher seas. Of course, we get the coastal flooding in spots. That's what I was highlighting earlier. This is all the way through Wednesday, through the entire week, up and down the east coast of the U.S., Bahamas, the northern passageways into the Atlantic. Very, very rough, very, very dangerous. This is all the way by Thursday. So again, stay out of the water. We got to watch things very carefully in the water, no doubt. So Imelda, it should be named today. We'll wait and see, but Ombberto is still out there. And as we go down the list, Jerry, Karen, and Lorenzo will be the next three named systems. Hopefully we don't have those. But again, the hurricane season goes all the way through the end of November. We know that the last few years, November has been actually oddly very active, especially early November. So watching the rain, additional rain, Freeport, New Providence. We're looking at some of these totals that could push 20 centimeters of rain or higher along the immediate coast of some of the rain bands from the Carolinas, North and South Carolina. I highlighted that earlier, but Georgia down through Florida, we could get anywhere from about 3 to 4 inches of rain with some of those rain bands moving in. But again, heaviest stuff staying offshore. Here's the additional rain. Jamaica, eastern Cuba, parts of Haiti. Not all of us, right? Not all of us are going to get this today in the next couple of days. But where we do get it, we could get over 100 millimeters of rain or 4 inches of rain. And if that happens in some of the spots that already have the flooding, we will see additional flooding. Not as much across the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. And this is all spotty. Puerto Rico, British, U.S. Virgin Islands, Saba, Statia, Anguilla. We swing to the south. Dominica, St. Lucia, Barbados, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, scattered areas of rain. We'll see a few areas of rain in Trinidad. Suriname mainly dry, spotty. Venezuela over toward Guyana. But again, heavier pockets into here. Interior Honduras, watching northwestern Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, back through Costa Rica, Panama. Some spots 100 to about 150 millimeters of rain for 3-day totals. That's 4 to 6 inches of rain. That's a good bit of rain. We've had some of the flooding through parts of Mexico. Still Mexico City west, some rain scattered about across the Yucatan. Texas, not a whole lot of action. Not a lot of action here. Of course, all eyes on what's going on here across the southeast. But the overall news